and welcome back to another episode of the Practice Players Podcast. This one has definitely been in the works for a while. It's going to be very fun to have Ohio State Associate Head Coach Jake Diebler on. Coach, appreciate you joining us today.
Happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a ton of fun. Expect a lot of good moments in this one, but to start it off, if you just want to explain to the viewers sort of your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, before we do that, David, you know all of us, so I want to establish who the best shooter is on the screen right now.
On the screen right now?
Yes.
This is trap question. If we're talking overall shooting, incorporating off the dribble, off movements, off screens, I'm going to have to go with Coach. However,
Smart.
Nick gives you a close off the dribble run for your money, and Dan gives you a close catch and shoot. But incorporating both facets, I think I have to go with you.
Sounds like a very politically correct answer.
Yeah, that was a safe answer. He didn't want to get
Although our last episode, we did just have Jameson on, and he claimed to be the best shooter in the shot. So I don't know what you want to do with that information.
Well, you don't believe that, so he's got a lot to prove to me in order to get that title. But no, appreciate you having me on, guys. Yeah, so where to start? I'll start with kind of how I wasn't going to go into coaching. How about that? My father was still a high school coach here in Ohio and has been coaching for, probably coming up on 50 years, it seems like. Started coaching right away. Both my parents were educators, and I really, in my mind, I was going to use basketball to help get the best degree I could so I could go into business and become a millionaire. That was like my mindset coming out of high school. So I actually committed to go to West Point and was supposed to go there, committed my junior year, found out right after Christmas, my senior year, I got a letter in the mail saying I was medically disqualified to serve in the Army. At the time, Valpo was recruiting my brother, who might be the best shooter, but they were recruiting him, and it was funny. Like 2 weeks before, they had told my dad, "Hey, if for some reason things don't work out at Army, we'd love to have Jake." So things didn't work out. Immediately, my parents put me in a car, drive me to Valpo. At this point, my dad had never coached a Division I player, so we didn't really know how the recruiting process worked. But we were scared I was going to have to pay for college. So they drive me to Valpo, hung out with Homer Drew for a day, and that's how I ended up there. And while I was at Valpo, I actually got saved, and that's what sparked in me a desire to go into coaching. So as I explain my journey, I think it's important just for you guys to know, like, that's how I decided to go into this profession. I view this, as almost like a calling, essentially. And I love this age group of young men that I get to work with because this was the age when my life was most impacted. So fast forward, I was able to stay on as, at the time, a student assistant. I was the one off-court position we had at Valpo. It was essentially, you could have called me a GA, could have called me a Dobo, but I was a video coordinator. I was doing all that, and I did that for 2 years. I was the one off-court position we had. Bryce Drew gets the head job. Bryce Drew was my position coach when I played there. And for the next 3-4 months, I think he tried to find someone else and kept telling me, "Hey, I'm not gonna hire you as an assistant. You're not ready, but you can go recruiting right now because I haven't figured out who that's going to be." And then we come back. It's like, "Well, I still haven't figured it out yet. So you can work guys out until I find that person." And eventually he never did. So I was in the right place at the right time. And I guess I did good enough work that he gave me a chance to be an assistant coach at my alma mater when I was 24 years old. So did that for a couple years, and then actually went from assistant to video coordinator at Ohio State. A lot of people looked at me a little crazy when I did that, but I felt like it was the right move for me to see something different, to get a chance to experience things at this level. Did that for 3 years under Thad Matta, went with Bryce as an assistant when he got the head job at Vanderbilt, was there for 3 years. And then got on here at Ohio State and getting ready to go into year 5. So it's kind of a quick rundown of how I got into coaching and where I've been since.
Yeah, that was honestly our next question. I was gonna kind of be like, what made you get into coaching? But so I'll sidetrack. So we talk to Dave all the time. Obviously, he calls us. He's like, Deeves wants to get on, whatever. I want to ask you, what's your favorite all time Vegas moment? Like with Dave. What are the give us something good.
Well, let me brag on him for a little bit. So the one thing I love about him is he doesn't take himself too seriously, but does a really serious job, if that makes sense. We like to have a lot of fun, and I think for me, I don't think managers get the full respect they deserve. It's such an important role within a program, right? And I'm not even going to pretend like I know everything that Dave does or that managers across the country do, but I do know that I value those guys at such a high level. And it's important in my opinion, especially in my position, to make sure they feel like a part of the program. So part of that includes, like, you're not safe from being teased or made fun of or whatever, right? So I can't share any real specific information because that stays in house. But I will say this, Dave, I love him. What I love about Dave is he's always available. Sometimes scheduling gets mixed up or whatever, and he's always available. He's coachable, and he knows this. Like, when we work out, there's a certain pace to our individual workouts, and if I don't like that pace, probably everybody knows it, including Dave sometimes. But he's reliable. I could count on him. I think he's got great rapport with our guys, which is important. And so I'm just super appreciative of him. I'm not going to give you any bad story, but just I'm gonna brag on him a little bit. So, but I do think managers are so very important to programs across the country. They don't get enough credit. It is a really, really hard and selfless position within an organization, but extremely important. And Dave has set the tone for our guys here now. For how many years you been with us, Dave?
Year 3.
Going on year 3.
Time flies, but definitely appreciate the kind words and you not talking on any bad stories, because there's obviously probably some embarrassing ones in there.
Dave did try to take me out in a manager game one time. Tried to run up under me when I was shooting a 3 in his eye, and tried to sprain my ankle and tear my Achilles. But outside of that, no issues.
It's a controversial call. We couldn't find the footage, but a lot of people may have said there was a leg kick out, a jump forward, but there's no set boundary there. The video got lost.
Yeah, a lot of people named Dave said that.
What's it called? Not bouncing back to sort of the more serious stuff. Sort of, you've become a global, not global, or like countrywide known recruiter. So what are some of the sort of strategies or styles that you do, without revealing too much, to get the right players?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I love recruiting. Recruiting kind of selfishly feeds my competitive fix, not being able to be on the court and playing anymore. Certainly there's, right, the competitiveness of a season, but I think there's a real competitiveness in recruiting, and I enjoy it. I really enjoy the relationship building that exists. And I think ultimately that's what's, helped me, recruit at the level that I've been able to recruit at. Now, listen, I think I've worked at some unbelievable places, and that's important, right? Because I believed in what we were able to recruit people to at Vanderbilt. I believe what we're able to recruit guys to here at Ohio State. So it isn't. I'm not selling this kind of false, right, reality to kids. I'm recruiting them to come be a part of something I really believe in, and I think families, kids, they're able to feel how genuine that is. But ultimately, it boils down to relationship building. Anytime you want to have a great relationship, right, you got to work at it, and work really, really hard. And then I think there's also one thing we've been able to do well is evaluate and find guys who project out to maybe be better than what some people may view them at that time. I've had some success with that over the years, but the secret sauce in recruiting is it's genuinely building relationships and doing it in a manner, right? Like it takes a lot of, just like you would, like, my marriage takes work. Got to have a great relationship with my wife. Shout out to my wife. She's the real MVP. She may never watch this, but Dave, you can tell her I said that. But seriously, any relationship you have, right, you got to work at it. And I think recruiting is the same thing. It's about building relationships, trust. We view my view in recruiting is I'm building a foundation so that when you get to Ohio State, I'm not getting to know you anymore. I already know you. We know each other really, really well. We've built that foundation. There's a level of trust. So I can start coaching you right away. I can coach you hard, can push you to levels you haven't been pushed, but you can't do that if you don't have that foundation. So we're laying that foundation in recruiting, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and commitment to that. So that's what I think it is. I don't think there's any, secret, just hard work and intentionality about building real relationships.
Yeah, Coach, you've been in now what it seems like in the college basketball industry for a good amount of time. What have been some of the recruiting changes and challenges, specifically with the NIL and the new transfer portal for you?
Yeah, I think some of the conversations have changed. I think NIL's leveled the playing field a little bit too. And listen, I would fall on the side of, I think NIL is a good thing. I think there needs to be some guidelines, maybe in place, but I'm all for guys, families, right, benefiting from the business side of college basketball, because that's real. But I think the calendar needs fixed. I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say is the calendar is a little broken right now. Figuring out how to fix that to where, one, it's, I think player safety. You look at the end of the summer. I hate to see it happens every year. The very end of the summer, you see kids getting hurt, where they may not have been earlier in the year. So is that an overuse thing? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly why that is, but I don't think it's coincidence that every end of the year tournament I'm at, you see multiple injuries. So I think there's a player safety thing at the young age of making sure that there's not an usage. The travel component can be hard on kids and families too. I think we need to be mindful of that, but figuring out a calendar that fits both high school kids and college coaches, because the hard part now is you feel like, right, you get your new team together in the summer, but then you're being pulled away from them, which is a real challenge. So I think figuring out how to find that balance that fits everybody. There's some things that can be done to do that, but that to me is where recruiting needs like the most help. I think certainly some of the conversations have changed around NIL, but I don't think NIL has been like this major issue. I think it's just it's a new variable that you gotta work through and communicate through. So I like some of the empowerment of the players that's happening with, the transfer portal with NIL. I just think there needs to be maybe some guidelines or guardrails kind of put in place, and there's a timing element to all of this, right? Timing's critical in recruiting, and that timing element can be fixed maybe with some adjustments in the calendar.
And talking about one of the better classes, if not one of the best classes you've ever recruited. If I recall correctly, it's the highest in Vanderbilt school history with Aaron Nesmith, Darius Garland, a couple other guys. What sort of went into, bringing that group together, and what made it so special?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, great young men. As good of a player as Darius Garland is, he's equally as good of a person. And his family was awesome. It was a very tight knit group. I think all of those guys had very small circles. Darius, it was a huge time commitment to recruit him. And that's someone I still communicate with regularly to this day, and his family the same. And obviously we didn't get to see the kind of his college career come to fruition, but the goals, the great part about that class was we genuinely believed, right, those were NBA players, and to see that all come true off of hard work. Like, at that time, Darius Garland wasn't being talked about as being a one and done. He had some very specific things he needed to work on. He got to campus and he got to work. He was the last guy to leave the gym pretty much every day. Aaron Nesmith is one of the hardest, practice guys I've ever coached. I think there's probably a group of maybe 3 or 4 guys I would put him in. Aaron Kraft would be up there. I think Bruce Thornton has that quality for us right now, of guys who literally are going as hard as they possibly can every rep. And his recruitment was almost an accident. Like, I was in between games, I believe in Atlanta. I think at the time I was watching a young Ohio team just because of my connections to the state. And there's, transition dunk, transition three, another dunk, and on this court beside me, and there's a bunch of Ivy League coaches over there watching. So I'm like, oh, okay, who's this guy? Ivy League watching, need to go look at him. And text a couple, scouting service guys, get some info. I think at the time he's probably not even ranked in the top 150, but we start talking right after that event. We watch him the rest of the summer, and he's, committed in what ended up being an absolute dogfight of a recruitment with Florida. It ends up committing to us in a quick turnaround that fall. So that was almost by chance. But I think sometimes the best recruitments are really short too. Darius's recruitment was really, really long. It was the first stop I made as an assistant coach at Vanderbilt. Aaron's was really short, but both equally great kids. And I think just deserving of what they've gotten, which has been good. And then, you had Simi Shitu out of Canada, who was a McDonald's All-American in that class. Another guy on our staff did a great job with he and his family. And he's ended up having a good pro career overseas. So it was a fun class. It was frustrating in the moment to see we didn't get to fully experience that team struggled once Darius got hurt. We actually beat 2 NCAA tournament teams when he was healthy. We were undefeated. So he was certainly a big piece of what our plans were that year. But ultimately, as a coach, to be in New York City with Darius and his family, hear his name called, right? I'd trade wins to hear guys' name called and their lives change forever any day of the week. I think that's, again, going back to why I got into coaching, it's to help, right, young men at this age, become better men and better their lives. And he was able to do that. Now, it was painful after he got hurt for us, but just, be there with him. And then Aaron a year later, to sit down with Aaron and his family, literally, and it was like 10 months after he had committed, and the guy was barely a top 150 player. And now he has a decision. Do I stay in the draft and be a late first round, early second? Or do I come back to school? Like, that happened so fast. But again, he deserved it. Ends up coming back to school, goes on, becomes a lottery pick. So I think it was a lot of fun. Great young men, though, and great players.
And that's one thing I've always sort of admired about you, is your ability to build just genuine relationships and know that those are truthful. And hearing you say, like, trade wins for hearing guys' names called, like, most coaches probably would say that, but I don't think a lot of guys mean that. But knowing you personally, you 1,000% mean that. So that's just something that I definitely respect about your style, and why I think that makes you as successful as you've been.
Appreciate that.
Then bouncing back, sort of, what are some of those, outside of genuine relationships, team building philosophies that you try to implement, whether it's, basketball related or even off court stuff?
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to, I think relationship building is all about, like, time. The best equity we have. Time is so valuable, right? I don't need to sit here and tell you, like, how busy it is being a college coach. You guys are around college coaches, there's a lot that goes to being that. So making sure, being intentional about carving out time, individual time with guys, time with a group of them, having them over to our house, cooking a meal for them seeing me with my wife and kids. And, I think investing time, guys, they know how important time is and how valuable it is. And I think they're really appreciative. So creating, one-on-one time and investing that, but also I think creating time for them, right? It's got to be, it can't just be within the lines. I think there's a great deal that's developed within the lines of chemistry, overcoming some adversity together, all of that stuff. But it's also, you also got to have that outside, whether it's eating meals together, playing video games together, dropping some controversial questions just to stir up some arguments together, right? Like just being intentional about that. And I think you got to, one of the things I make sure to do is make myself available for guys to poke holes at too, and poke fun at. And I think not just dishing it out, but being willing to kind of take some back. So time, committing the time necessary. There's no shortcuts, in my opinion, to building true chemistry. It just takes a real investment of time.
Yeah, chemistry, and I think Nick and I can also vouch for that in our programs too, how important that is, even just for us as managers, but even up to our head coach. What are strategies that you use for balancing such a time-consuming job with your family life?
Yeah, I don't do a very good job of it. My wife would probably confirm that, but I think for me, it's worked, like finding time. But my kids get up really early, so when I would typically try to get a workout in, I'll sacrifice that to be with my kids. Trying, when I'm in Columbus, trying to get home in time for bedtime, even if it's just 10 minutes before, to read a book or something, like really trying to do that. And when I do walk through the door, sometimes it's only for like 10, 15 minutes, depending on who's calling, but I try to like put my phone down. And I have again, my wife is actually the MVP of kind of our family. She's super understanding. She's very supportive. She allows me, right, to like be on my phone all the time when I'm at home. And then we have got, like, there will be nights I could be gone recruiting for 2-3 nights in a row. I'm home for 1 or 2 nights, and then I got to leave another couple nights. And she's good with one of those few nights I'm home of the week having 4, 5, 6 guys over for dinner. And so I think, as understanding as she is, it's been so important. And then I work for an unbelievable boss. He's got no issue if my kids come up to the office and run around for 20, 30 minutes. It's like a madhouse, but he's great with it. And so those little touch points, like, I think having a frequency to those is important. It might not be as long as any of us would like, but figuring out ways to get 10, 20, 30 minutes here or there, I've found to be really, really important.
What kind of advice would you give to young coaches, maybe managers or walk-ons kind of getting into coaching? What's some advice you'd give?
Yeah, I got great advice from a coach when I was just getting started, and it was probably the best advice I could have possibly heard, because when I first got into coaching, I went from being a player to a coach. All I heard about, right, was you got to network. And I almost became consumed by networking. And in doing so, I wasn't fully valuing the most important network, which is the one right where I was, if that makes sense. So he told me, he's like, stop worrying so much about the next job. Do an unbelievable job at the one you're at. And I think when you're just getting started in this profession, right, whether it's going from a manager to a GA or a video coordinator, or going from a video coordinator to an assistant, or an assistant to associate head coach, or associate head coach to head coach, whatever that is, I think we have to resist the temptation to be too focused on what's next. Because the reality is, like, if I'm fortunate enough to get a head job sometime soon, the first people that I'm going to look at to bring with me are going to be the people I've worked with the last few years. And because is it necessarily out of loyalty? I think loyalty is a component to that, but it's a trust thing. It's a trust thing. So, if you're a manager, like, any good assistant coach who wants to become a head coach is watching you, is developing relationship with you, because if he leaves, right, he wants to have guys he can bring with him to hit the ground running right away. And so I'm not here to say, like, networking is not important. I don't know necessarily that I've ever gotten a job because of this, like, great network, but I've always gotten the next job because I did a really, really, really good job at the place I was before. And the best advocates for me have been people I've worked for or worked with. So I just think we got to be, young guys in this profession, I just would be cautious of focusing too much on what's next. Do an unbelievable job where you're at. Support the people you work with on a daily basis at a really high level. And if you do that, good things will happen to you. You'll get opportunities. Because if I want to hire someone someday and I can't get an unbelievable recommendation, like a real one, not the kind where it's like, oh yeah, he does a good job, like, but a real one. If I can get a real unbelievable recommendation from the people you worked with on a daily basis, like, I don't care what someone else in your network says, right? So I think it's really important. And the reality is, you're most likely, the fastest way is probably going to be with someone that you worked with on a daily basis. So do a great job where you're at, be where your feet are. I'm not saying don't network. I'm not saying it's not valuable, but I think too often the focus is on the network and spending time outside of, the walls you're at every day, whereas you can really be doing a great job where you are. And that's the best help.
I love it. That's definitely tremendous advice. And I think that's a great place to sort of leave this episode on. We made it a full 30 minutes without me mentioning Jalen Brunson once on an episode, so that's a record.
Not anymore.
Yeah, we lasted 30 minutes.
I had to hear about the Knicks. I mean, can't lie though. Jalen Brunson he's the real deal. But yeah, I can imagine you guys being with him on a daily basis, hearing about him.
Luckily for us, and when we were in high school, there was nobody on the Knicks that he was very high on. But
who was there to be high on?
Chris Stapps. I'm sorry.
I think those are the Alexei Shved days of the New York Knicks. So
it was sad, but
he's waited. He's waited for the Knicks to be good. So I'm gonna let him cheer hard.
21 years of pain.
The New York Villanova Wildcats now have a roster.
But Coach, definitely appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Again, I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. I love you got some friends putting something together like this. If I can ever help you, let me know, and I'll try to keep Dave humble.
I know it's a hard job.
All right, guys, have a good one. Let me know if you need anything else.